Also, I saw a few questions in the chat. Usually, well, you will receive a copy of this recording, well, a link to the recording and a link to where the presentation and any information that's shared today. You'll receive that by tomorrow morning. Just wanted to let everybody know. Now I'll turn it back over to you, Margaret.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. You can move on to the next slide. So what do you look for? How do you decide if a business partner is a good partner, and how do you like deploy your spidey senses? Look at what the government wants out of its business partners. They want business conducted in a manner above reproach. They want you to operate with the highest degree of trust. They want you to be responsible as you do your business, conscientious. They want you to be ethical, and they want you to make sure you follow the laws. So when you're selecting somebody to do business with, you should select and decide to do business with the same sort of person, entity, I mean, that the government wants to do business with. Let's move to the next slide. And what does responsible mean? Because that word was up above. The reason I have it in quotes is because responsible, weirdly enough, is a term used in the regulations. So it's like a legally defined term. I think we all know what responsible means in our own lives, but the government gives you a definition of it in the FAR. Have the ability to satisfactorily perform previous contracts, that you have operated and made decisions of integrity and with ethics. That's key in selecting a business partner. That your business partner has good accounting and financial systems. They have administrative and operational controls in place to run their business. They have the technical expertise, the capability, and the financial resources to perform. That's what the government wants in its prime contractors. You as businesses, you should want that in the businesses that you partner with. Let's move on. So subcontractor responsibility. If you are a prime, then what happens is you are now responsible, like a parent is responsible for a child. If you're a prime, you're responsible for your subcontractors. You need to make sure that your subcontractors can demonstrate that they have fulfilled that list that I put up on the previous slide. And if you're a prime contractor, the government is going to determine if you're capable and competent based on how good you are at selecting your subs. So, and have you evaluated to make sure your subs are responsible and capable. So when you are subcontracting with somebody, you need to make sure that they have the capabilities to perform the contract as the government expects based on that list of responsibility. We can move on. Okay. One of the ways you can partner with somebody, if you're a small business, you could be a protege. And if you're a large business, you could be a mentor. So what is mentor protege? It is a regulation that talks about how two businesses can team up together to perform a government contract. The mentor is a large business that is going to help that small business learn to start performing government contracts. And then the protege is the small business that's going to benefit from the large business's capabilities. The mentor can help a small business with the technical approach to delivering on a contract. It can help the small business with their back office operations and help the small business figure out the way to compete for federal government businesses. A mentor can even, if a large mentor is looking at a set aside, you can work with a small business to do that set aside. And so that is what the agreement is. And it's a regulation. That 13 CFR 124 is the regulation that says a large business can mentor, that is, help a small business. So this is a way to have a business partner and a business relationship in the federal government contracting world between a large and a small, essentially where the large is able to help the small. We can move to the next slide. Okay, protege requirements. You should, if you want to be a protege, you should consult with the SBA, the Small Business Administration, before you apply to be a protege and before you team up with your mentor. You've got to be an 8A entity. That is, that you have special 8A status, woman-owned, veteran-owned, one of those. You've got to be in good standing with the Small Business Administration. Generally, you can only have one mentor. That is one large business to be helping you. And you have to be in process of trying to work towards being a small government, a small business that contracts with the government. And then you can work together with your mentor. If we go on to the next slide. Now, we just talked about a type of business arrangement called mentor-protege. Mentor-protege is a type of business arrangement that is defined in the small business regulations that allow a big business and a small business to work together on federal government contracting. An entirely different type of work is what's called, or a relationship is a joint venture. A joint venture is different than a mentor-protege, and it is when two or more businesses form a joint venture together. Now, this is not necessarily a federal government contracting exclusive way to have a relationship with another business. Commercial businesses that have nothing to do with the federal government can form a joint venture, and they often do. A joint venture can have two businesses in it, or it could have even more businesses in it. A joint venture is when you decide that another business or multiple other businesses, if you team together to form an organization, are going to be more effective at pursuing whatever capability or whatever opportunities you have out there. Now, it is its own organization. So think venture, you have to think it's like another organization. It's like a business. So you have to register it with the state as a business, and you have to then register with the government, with SAM, as if it's another business. Then you need to have everything in place as if it is a business. The joint venture members, the businesses in the joint venture, should have an operating agreement that defines all aspects of the joint venture, of how it's going to work. This is what I'm talking about when I say developing a relationship with another business partner is like getting married. You want to understand and be able to communicate and clearly define what each of you are going to contribute and what each of you want to get out of the relationship. So your joint venture operating agreement should tell you everything about how you're going to run the joint venture, which, as I said, is an organization. Management. Who's going to manage the organization? How's the management of the organization going to get paid to manage the organization? Which of the businesses in the joint venture are going to be the ones managing? Are you going to have one person who sort of oversees operations and then have like a board of directors or a committee? If so, who's on it? And how do you parse out who's the final decider? If you're run by a board, how are the different board members going to have authority? Is somebody going to have 50%? Is somebody else going to have 25% control of the organization? Same with ownership. Who owns this entity? Does somebody own 10%? Does somebody own 50%? And if you own it, what do you have to contribute? Do you have to buy in? Somebody asked, does a JV require an EIN? Yes, it does. So it is its own separate business. And you define ownership as well. Who owns it and how much of it do they own? You got to define finances. If you're an owner, how much do you have to contribute to be in ownership and to have your portion of the JV? It also should define how revenue is parsed out. So if the joint venture makes $1,000, how is that $1,000 parsed out? Who gets it? And how much of it is going to be used to operate the business? What do you do if you don't have enough money to operate the business? Do you do a cash call to all joint venture members? How do you handle intellectual property? And much, much more. So that is what a joint venture is. Now, somebody just asked, if one small business is in a JV and they're an 8A, does the JV receive 8A status, or does the JV have to apply? This is from Stacy. Stacy, you're going to kill me because I'm going to give the total lawyer answer. It depends. It depends on many, many things. Is the joint venture going to go after set aside work and that's all? How much of the JV does the 8A own? Like, do they own a certain percent and do they own enough? How much control and management does the 8A have over the joint venture? How much money does the joint venture earn? Does it earn so much that you lose your status as a small? So In response to Stacy's very good question, can a small be in an 8A? Can an 8A join a JV? And if it does the JV get an 8A? It depends on all those factors that I just said. How much revenue is the JV making? What's the definition of small in that industry? How much of the JV does the 8A own? How much of the JV does the 8A control? And if they control it, how do they control it? Those are all the questions that need to be considered around a joint venture. We can go to the next slide.
Margaret, we do have a few questions in the Q&A. And for everybody, if you place your question in the chat, can you please place it in the Q&A? That helps us to be able to track it to make sure that we are responding to the questions.
I was only looking at the chat, not the Q&A.
Oh, no, it's okay. I'm going to read it out to you if that's
Okay.
okay. Or did you want to wait till the end?
Nope, I'm okay with some now.
Okay, so we have one question that said, is there a place to find contracts for the mentor protege program if you know who the prime is?
I don't so much understand that question, to find contracts for the mentor protege, but you would find, I'll answer it this way. You would find a mentor, if you're small, you would find a mentor just like you would find another business to team up that's a large, right? Maybe you want a large to help you perform a contract where you're the prime or vice versa. You would find your mentor the same way. I would also urge you to go to the VA. These guys would have ways for you to locate other businesses, whether you're looking for a mentor or whether you're looking for a protege. So there's not like one place that says this is the contracts that get mentor protege. It's instead, you know, what business are you going to go after? Okay, I hope that helps. I see
And
that
I believe I say contracts. Anna corrected me. Thank you, Anna. They say contacts. Is there a place to find contacts for the mentor protege program?
Thanks, Wendy. I would say, and Anna, Wendy join in, I think your best bet probably is to go to the small business office of whatever agency you're interested in working with, and then use your own resources as well.
So also it's not just the Small Business Administration. There are 6 other mentor protege programs that have, I think it's about 7, if I'm not mistaken, small mentor protege programs. So you could reach out to those agencies. The Small Business Administration has that information on their website. They have a training, on their YouTube about the small business. I keep saying small business, the mentor protege program. Theirs and the other agencies, I think like DOD. So you could go there to get information about the mentor protege program. You can also conduct your market research by utilizing USA Spending. You can see who are the buyers. Even on sam.gov, there are reports that shows who, not the buyers, who the recipients are of those awards. If you were looking for contacts for businesses to partner with. Now that mentor protege program, and I believe Margaret already said it, you would be, SBA is kind of like the middleman for that program.
Yeah.
So they will help you, or I believe you have to bring that partner with you. But if you want to do business with somebody that's already doing business with VA, go ahead and go on, like I said, sam.gov or usaspending.gov, find those businesses, those large businesses, or even just large, small businesses that are already doing business with VA, and you can reach out for a potential relationship. But that's where you can find some of those contacts, specifically that are doing business with the other agencies.
Yep. Thank you. I could just buzz through them. The mentor protege is for 8A, and it should, and I use the term newcomers. I mean, again, newcomers is in the eye of the beholder. So again, I can't hit every very detailed regulatory requirement, but it's designed for 8As to try to get them going and up and running. We talked about needing an EIN, yes. If one small business is a JV, does the JV status apply? We answered that. Thanks for moving it over here. Somebody writes and says, does joint venture affect my current certifications as an independent company? I'm not sure what that means, but a joint venture is a separate company. Then, like, if you have a company that you're already running and operating and using, the joint venture would be a whole separate company. And in certain instances, you would have to disclose that you're part of a JV. Like if you're a defense contractor and you hold a facility clearance, you may have to talk about your JV. The Small Business Administration may expect you to talk about your JV. So it would depend on where you mean, in what certifications, I think to mean. I hope that helps on that question. I'm losing track here a little bit, Wendy.
It says, can a small business, oh yeah, because it kind
Keeps
of jumps
jumping.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Can a small business with certifications like woman-owned small business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, purchase an existing business with experience to help qualify for new contract?
That's a great question. And maybe let's go to the next slide because I think it might deal with it a little bit. Yes, affiliation. So in response to Devin's question, again, it's going to depend. If you're a small business and you want to purchase another business with experience to start qualifying for new contracts, you have to determine, is that other business that you're purchasing going to, quote unquote, be considered an affiliated business such that you grow out of your small business status. So remember, you only get to be small based on your NAICS codes. So if you purchase another business and bring their employees and their revenue into your business, depending on the size, it may turn you into not a small anymore. Likewise, a joint venture relationship, depending on the situation, can make you not be a small. A prime contractor relationships, if not done thoughtfully, can turn you into not a small. If you have common management with another business, that could turn you into not a small. Your small business, you guys remember, has to be a small, and it has to be run by either, like if it's a woman, it's got to be run by a woman. If it's a vet owned, it's got to be run by the vet. And you can't have some other persons or entities sort of pulling the string in the background. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. Let's see.
And I can answer some of the questions while you continue on, Margaret. I'll be answering them in the chat. I mean, in the
Okay,
Q&A.
that's a great idea because we're getting really good questions. Okay, and some of them may get answered. So if you could move to the next slide. Okay, due diligence. This is what I talk about when you're deciding who your business partner is, right? You guys, you got to do due diligence. Find out the business partner, no matter what, you're going to team with them. If you're going to do a JV, Metro Protege, subprime, whatever, find out their reputation. How did you meet them? Talk to their bankers, their accountants, other business partners. What skills do they have? How's their pricing? What are their employees like? Will partnering with them impact your status as a small? How do they communicate? Are they more casual and informal, or do they like a really formal environment? What's their appetite for risk? Are they operating ethically and legally? Do that sort of due diligence, because again, even a good contract's not going to save you from a bad actor. We can move to the next slide. Due diligence, we sort of already talked about this. What do you want to look at? You want to assess their financial, do Google searches or other, you can even hire businesses to do searches, find out if they have a litigation history, look at their news reports, find out about their owners, figure out if they are an entity that is sanctioned or debarred or suspended by the federal government. You don't want to sign up with somebody who's suspended by the feds. That'll defeat your whole purpose of getting fed work. How do they do business? Do they seem like they know what they're doing from a financial and operational and technical perspective? Really think through that to make sure you have a good business partner. Next question, or next slide. Can the business partner deliver? Think about that. What is their price and cost relative to yours, right? Does it pair well with what you're trying to do? What about the quality of their services, their past performance, their capabilities? Does their management have capabilities? Do their folks who work for them know what they're doing? Do you want both the same thing? And what are your work cultures? Do you fit together? Because you're going to go through a lot of stuff if you team with somebody, joint venture, mentor protege, prime subcontract. You're going to have a lot of problems to solve together, good and bad, and you want to have somebody that you know you can count on. We can go to the next slide. And jump in, Wendy or Ann, if there's something I should look at. Very quick, I'm not going to spend time on this because we already talked about where you could find a good mentor. This is where you could find good business partners. I have a couple ideas on you for that, and then check in with the VA or the small business. They can help you as well. We can go to the next slide. Okay, teaming agreements. But before I begin there, Ann or Wendy, is there something I should answer from the chat box, or have you been keeping up with everybody?
Going through it now. It's okay.
Okay, great. Okay, teaming. We could go to the next slide. What is a teaming agreement? Now, remember before I told you guys that a joint venture can happen in the commercial world, doesn't have anything to do with federal government contracting. Mentor protege is a specific thing out of the small business regulations. Teaming agreements are something that is in the FAR, and that down below there, I put where in the FAR you could find the description of teaming agreements if you want to go read it. A teaming agreement, according to the FAR, and is what you would be doing, is an agreement between two or more companies. Remember, you could team with more than one. You can have a team of multiple companies, two or more companies that form a partnership or a joint venture, or where one of them is going to be a prime or a sub, where you're going to go after government contracts together. You decide we're going to team up and we're going to pursue opportunities together because we together are going to give the best value to the government. We could go to the next slide. What does the government want in a team? So why, when you think to yourself, like, why do I even want a team? That you would want a team because if you team up with another business, you're going to be able to provide the best value product or the best value service to the government customer. So you're going to give the government customer a reasonable and fair price. You're going to be able to provide them the best quality, respond in a timely fashion, and have successful performance. And if you could do that better with somebody as a team, then the government's like, go for it and form a team and pursue the work as a team. And then if you get the contract, remember, if you're teaming together, once you get the contract, then you're going to want to form either a prime subcontract relationship or something else to actually start performing that contract. We can go to the next slide. Okay. GSA, some of you may be on the GSA schedule. The GSA schedule, for those of you not familiar, it's kind of like the Amazon of government contracting. The GSA allows businesses to apply and get on the schedule where you offer whatever goods or services you can provide to the government, and then agencies can go to the GSA schedule and find goods or services that they're looking for. So when you go on the GSA schedule, let's say you're on it or somebody else is not on it or you're both on it, you can team as a GSA teaming arrangement, which is entirely different than the teaming agreement in the FAR. It has its own requirements. So it's like if two organizations that have supply schedule, GSA supply schedule contracts, decide that they can complement each other, then they can go ahead and team. And what's interesting about this is I have another lawyer phrase in there, privity of contract. If you are in a GSA teaming arrangement, so two businesses, you've teamed up together and now together you're going to sell something to the government, each of those businesses is considered to be in a relationship directly with the federal government. So you're a team, but you're both almost going to be like primes. That is different than the FAR teaming arrangement where only one of you could be the prime. Okay, we can go on to the next schedule or the next slide.
There's a question in the chat, Margaret.
I'm ready.
I think there may have been, because I see a few questions about it. They said on the mentor protege program, you mentioned having, in order to be a part of the AA, a business had to be an SDBOSB. So they were asking for clarification concerning SDBOSBs and AA.
I hope I didn't say that. For mentor protege, you've got to be an 8A of any sort. There's a bunch of different kinds.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify to everyone.
Let me clarify that. So you have to be a socioeconomic category company.
That's a better way of saying it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, AA is one of those programs, but yeah, it's small. In fact, the SBA program is called All Small Mentor Protege Program. So small or any socioeconomic designation, and the relationship can take on the socioeconomic status per agreements, as Margaret has explained. Okay, back to you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Thank you.
There was another question. For new
Yes.
companies, what is the best way to team if you have existing certifications, such as an SDVOSB, and you want to leverage the resources of larger businesses?
Well, I mean, that's sort of a business decision. You could just form a regular teaming agreement with a large business and decide that you are going to go with that large business. You're going to team together. And if you win a contract for a particular contract, and if you win that contract, and if it's a set aside, then you'll perform, and then the large could be the small. Excuse me, the large could be the sub. Or you could team with the large, where the large is going to be the prime and you're going to be the sub, because you have the qualities and capabilities to perform, right? So you could team with the idea that you're going to, upon contract award, become into a prime and sub relationship. Alternatively, you could decide with a large that you're going to form a joint venture with them, as we talked about before. The joint venture then has to be its own freestanding company, like I said, and it'll define how the large and the small will work together as a joint venture. You got to be careful a little bit on that one, because there's certain requirements that a joint venture has to have. It's a little bit more complicated of a construct, I think, than a teaming agreement. You've got to have an operating agreement, like I talked about earlier, and all of those other things in place. Then your joint venture can register in SAM, and then your joint venture can go after contracts as a joint venture. And then the joint venture would be awarded the contract. And then the members of that joint venture, you as a small and the large, would then perform the contract. So that's another way to do it. And then there's the mentor protege, which is a relationship to go after government work, where the large is helping and supporting that small in their performance. I hope that helps.
And to piggyback off of what Margaret said, you don't have to choose one or the other. There are lots of businesses that actually have joint ventures, and they do business with that joint venture, and they still have their business where they're still doing business. So it doesn't, you don't have to, from the information that we're providing today, don't think that you have to choose one or the other. There are those various different opportunities or directions you can go in. I wanted to direct this next question to you, Anna. It says, if you enter a mentor protege program and you are a SDVOSB and your mentor is not, does this affect your set aside?
No, that does not affect your set aside. The goal of the mentor protege program is for the mentor to give resources to the protege, but that does not constitute the kind of control that the veterans program would find prohibitive.
And then the last question, I'm sorry.
Let me just jump on that as well, or that any of the other agency mentor proteges would find prohibitive. But
Right.
a huge caveat, you guys, if you're doing, if let's say you have a mentor protege relationship with one company, if you're doing other things with that company, if they're always the prime and you're always the sub, or every time you need a sub, you use them, if you share resources of your employees, if they're helping manage or control your company, all of these things can make you no longer a small. Mentor protege would be one factor if, in fact, you're doing all sorts of other stuff together as two businesses.
And it's those are really good examples, Margaret. And it's not the government that's going to be policing it; it's your competitors.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Anna's exactly right. Your competitors will file bid protests, and then that will get reviewed. Your competitors can file complaints with the Department of Justice that you're saying you're a small business of some nature, when in fact you're not, because you're doing all sorts of stuff with a big business. So Anna's exactly right. Okay, another question?
Yes, this will be the last question, and I'll turn it back over to you, Margaret.
Okay.
What would be a specific example of how a teaming agreement with a prime could force an SBA entity out of, for example, SDVOSB or Women-Owned Small Business certification?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple ways that can happen. Let's say you team with a company and they're pursuing a really large contract and you guys win it, and they give you so much work that now you're over your revenue, or your revenue dollar for your NAICS code. Another way that it can happen is sort of what I just discussed, was when you're a small, the government considers all aspects of all of your relationships to see if there's something that's going to cause you to no longer be as small. You know, have you been teaming too much and being a prime sub too much with a large business? Does a large business give you their employees to use for something? Do you have, you know, other, like a JV with that large? So there's all these factors, like when you're a small, like you're on your own little island operating, but at some point, if you have so many relationships, like say you just have a teaming relationship to go after one contract with a big, and then that's it. But if you start relationships so integrated with a large business from all sorts of different ways, teaming agreements, joint ventures, mentor protege, sharing employees, them helping you manage your company, all of those things taken together may cause your competitor to file a bid protest. It may cause the government to want to look and say, hey, listen, are they really a small, or do they have so many relationships with this large business, one of that being a teaming relationship, that we're not going to call them a small anymore? Like usually one teaming agreement arrangement usually isn't going to do you in unless if you get awarded and it's going to put you over your dollar limit for your code. But if it's a factor of other relationships that you have with that large business, then it could end your small business status. Okay, we could go on. Okay, so words matter when you're writing your contracts. Look at this: students cook and serve grandparents. You know they weren't doing that. So they were not cooking they were not cooking their grandparents. They were going to give them a meal that they cooked. So this is why contracts are important and challenging, and you want to make sure you get them down. So let's move to the next slide. Which one? Here's another example. Let's eat grandpa versus let's eat comma grandpa. That one little comma changes the whole structure of this sentence. Now take that idea and put it into a teaming agreement, put it into a subcontract prime agreement, put it into a joint venture agreement, and you're going to see how the words matter and how you're describing things and how you're going to work together. It's very important to be very precise in how you do that. And then add on to that, like, let's say you are going to do a mentor protege, the government has regulations of what your mentor protege agreement actually has to include. Like the clauses your contract, your mentor protege contract has to include. Let's move to the next slide. So before you even sign an agreement, or when you're early on talking and sharing information about your businesses and how you do things and possibly even your intellectual property, you should each get a non-disclosure agreement from each side. So if you're going to talk with somebody, whether you want to team with them, whether you want to prime subcontract, JV, mentor protege, you're going to start sharing detailed information about your company, and they're going to share detailed information about theirs. So you want to make sure you get a non-disclosure agreement to protect your intellectual property that says, oh gosh, you can't take our intellectual property and this is what it is. If you learn these things about our business, you cannot disclose that. It'll define what happens if one of the businesses in the agreement takes the information and goes off and does use it for some bad, reason, does use it improperly. You want to be able to have some sort of way to handle if there's a breach. You want to tell each side how you're going to protect the information. What level of protection are you expecting of your information? You got to say how long the non-disclosure agreement should last, who has the authority to sign it, and the expectation that all employees have to follow with it. So do that from the get-go so you protect your information and keep the confidentiality of your information so that a business partner you're talking with doesn't take your info and exploit it. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. One of the main things you want to protect is procurement sensitive information. And you want to be on the lookout for making sure that you're not improperly getting procurement sensitive information. Procurement sensitive information is non-public government information that you cannot have because it's not public, right? And if you get it, you can't use it. Even if you get it accidentally, you absolutely cannot use it for any purpose at all whatsoever. Non-public competitor information also cannot be obtained improperly or used improperly. And it includes things like for government and procurement sensitive information procurement sensitive information includes your other businesses' pricing and their costs. So that means when you're talking a teaming relationship or a JV or something like that, and you're sharing price and cost with each other, you're sharing procurement sensitive information with each other. So you want to protect it, and you cannot exploit it for your own purposes and benefits, nor should they. And your NDA helps you with that, but the law does as well. When you're sharing sensitive information that is non-public of your business, you want to mark it and say that it's non-public, that it's your proprietary information, your business owns it, and that it's sensitive and confidential. From the government side, things like their source selection plans, their cost estimates, and those types of things are non-public procurement information that you should not have access to, and that if you do get access to it, you need to think thoughtfully on how to manage that and walk yourself out of that situation. But for our purposes in talking today, when you're going to have business discussions with another government contractor, you're probably going to get procurement sensitive information, and both of you have to agree that you're going to protect it. You do that in an NDA, but also the FAR tells you have to protect it as well. We can go to the next slide. So teaming agreements, we talked on these a little bit before. What types of things should they include? Number one thing, are you going to be exclusive? So if you want to team with another business to go after an RFP, are you guys going to be exclusive to each other? Meaning you're not going to be able to team with anybody else and you have to go after that work just with each other. Are each members of the teaming agreement going to be guaranteed a certain part of the work? Let's say you win the contract, how much of the work does each member of the team expect that they'll get to perform? Allocation of costs. Going after an RFP has costs. How are you going to allocate those costs? Who's going to give the persons to help write the proposal, do market research, all of those sorts of things, and or who's going to pay those costs? How are you going to come up with your rates? If you're going to team to eventually be a prime and a sub, how are you going to determine your rates? How are you going to determine your pricing? As you're pursuing an opportunity and you're under a teaming agreement, talk about who's going to interact with the government. Do both partners get to interact with the government through the process or just one? How are you going to handle publicity? Are you allowed to put out notices and media alerts that you're teaming with somebody? How are you going to protect your intellectual property, your procurement sensitive information? Very granular things. How are you going to divvy up the tasks and the duties of pulling together a proposal? You want to include things around certifications of each other, that you're going to comply with the Procurement Integrity Act, that you're not going to have conflicts of interest because the FAR prohibits certain types of conflicts of interest. If you're dealing with export or other controlled items, that you're going to manage those controlled items properly. You may want to get a certification that each side is financially stable. You may want to get certs from each other that neither of you are suspended or debarred. So there's a lot of representations and certifications you should get from your teaming partner, and that should be included in the teaming agreement to protect yourself. Are you going to include a non-solicitation clause in there? On that one, you need to talk to employment lawyers because that's changing very rapidly, because the Federal Trade Commission is looking at that. So potentially you could have a non-solicit so they don't steal your employees. Again, confidentiality. You want to have secure confidentiality provisions. And then limitations of liability, indemnification. If something goes wrong and you guys get sued as a team, or you get sued individually related to this, how are you going to indemnify or look out for each other and spread out who's liable and who's not? And then last, if you're going to become a prime and sub, if you get the contract award, what are those prime and sub contract conditions going to be? What will the prime or the subcontract look like? Those are some of the things to think about putting in your teaming agreement. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so subcontracts, but I'm going to stop. Do we have any questions that we should be answering?
We do have a few.
Okay,
One
I'm
says,
ready.
if a company is new to federal government contracts and the company doesn't have any past performance with federal government contracts, how do they get contracts? Is that when we have to find a subcontractor with experience? I'd like to direct that one to Anna because it's more
I
so
would
about
too.
just doing business.
Yep, go Anna.
Um, So that's such a loaded question. So if you're new, figure out what is it that you're good at and what you bring to the team. Nobody is going to take you on to be their teaming partner, subcontractor out of the goodness of their heart. So you started a business for a reason. You do something really well. So your work and your market research in identifying teaming partners should be as serious as an undertaking as looking for government contracting, for direct federal opportunities. So, for example, many small businesses go for the large primes because it's easy to find them. They've got a budget to go to all the conferences. They have representatives in the booths and they have good giveaways. So you go there and you talk to them. But to them, you're a drop in the bucket. And that drop is very similar to many other drops. So what other relationships can you build? Maybe with companies that are smaller, maybe with companies that are similar but not exactly what you do, or maybe they are just growing out of that small business field themselves where they need, a partnership with a small so they continue earning some of the revenue from existing clients. So develop not only your niche but how to communicate it and build your partner strategy based on that. And I'm going to put a plug in for Wendy, who did a fantastic presentation on capability statements. So look at that. She spent some time on differentiators there as a start. Did I answer that?
Yes, thank you,
Okay,
Anna.
excellent.
The next question is, if you have a FAR teaming arrangement/agreement with two or more companies, do you refer to your team as a standalone entity with a name when responding to requests for proposals, or do you refer to your teaming relationship in terms of a prime and sub relationship?
That's a great question. And that's something you would have to decide as a group, right? Are you going to be prime and subs with each other, or are you going to form a joint venture? It sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You got to decide what your team is going to consist of, essentially.
Thank you. I know we're at 11 minutes. I'm not sure how much more of the presentation you have to go through, Margaret, but we can answer the questions at the end if we still have some more time. Or for everyone, if we are not able to get to your question during this live session, we will follow up via email at a later date, probably sometime next week, where we're responding to your question. Okay.
Thank you. I'll keep going through the slides quickly, and then whatever time we have left, because I think we've answered some of the questions that are on the slides. Or some of the questions have already been answered, so I don't want to spend much time on the slides. So let's talk about subcontracting. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So this is an important thing to think about. You got to think about your business partner. Are they a subcontractor, vendor, consultant, and why does it matter? Here's why it matters. A subcontractor, if you're going to be a subcontractor, then you're going to have to comply with all of the federal government contracting requirements that are to be flowed down to you as a subcontractor, right? And that will define what your subcontract looks like. There are times when a contractor has been awarded a government contract and now they're buying goods or services from another entity, but that entity is not really performing the essence of the government contract. They then would not be a subcontractor, and then they would not be subject to FAR requirements. So sometimes this is an important thing to think about when you are going to be a prime and you're deciding the businesses that you're going to work with and what they're going to add to your business. Are they adding to your business sort of generally, and if they are, then they're a vendor? Or are they advising your business sort of generally, then they're a consultant to your business? But if they're going to help you perform the elements of a government contract, then they're going to be a subcontractor. Even if they're a one-person consultant, they could still be a subcontractor. So make sure you understand like what a business partner is going to do for you, and then given what they do for you, what they are before you start always concluding they're a federal government subcontractor. We can move to the next slide. If you are a subcontractor and now you're going to get the subcontractor, Prime's going to give it to you. You're going to get all those flow down clauses of the government regulations. Make sure they're accurate, because sometimes the primes will give you flow down clauses and regulations and tell you that you have to comply with them when in fact they may not be applicable to your business. And sometimes that could be really significant, you guys. Like if you do some DoD work, there's cybersecurity requirements, and some of them are quite stringent over at DoD. Depending on your business and what you're doing, you may not have to comply with the most stringent of those DoD cybersecurity requirements. So make sure that the clauses your prime is telling you you got to comply with, make sure in your own analysis you have to follow them. Make sure you get your fair share of the work. Have a plan for the FAR requirements that you do have to comply with. Make sure you have a plan to do that. You're going to be asked to make certifications around different things about your business. You know, you're going to have to be sure that you're not using certain banned Chinese telecommunications. And that's only one example. So make sure you know when you make those certifications saying, I'm not doing this or I am doing that, that you know for sure that's true. If they're asking you to disclose sensitive business information, make sure that you feel protected and that you're protecting your intellectual property. And understand any cost of compliance. Like your performance of a government contract is not just the cost of your providing the services or the goods, it's the cost of all these compliance requirements with the regulations. So make sure you always consider that as well. Make sure if your prime asks if there's a clause in there around auditing you, make sure that you understand that. And, you know, it's always sort of good to know, does the government have to consent to you being a subcontractor or not? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So those are things to think about if you're going to be the subcontractor. And I think maybe Anna or Wendy mentioned this, you know, you guys have value. Just because you're a small, you absolutely have value. And because you have value, you have the right to bargain with your primes. So don't forget that. You can bargain with your primes around the subcontract terms and conditions. We can go to the next slide. Staying together for better or for worse, again, like marriage, contract style. Let's go to the next slide. Warning, it's always in the details. When businesses get in a fight, it's about the details of something that neither of them understands. Let's go to the next slide. The details for your subcontract that you want to see: pricing, how will you get paid, when will you get paid, conflicts of interest, protecting assets, how you're going to end, when can you terminate it, how much work are you going to share with, who's going to get what work, how are you going to resolve disputes, how are you going to, who's going to assume liability, who's going to communicate with the government, what are the quality standards of the products or services you're going to provide. Those are some examples of what your subcontract should include. It should define all aspects of your relationship. We can go to the next slide. And then have defined invoicing procedures. Whether you're the prime or the sub, make sure you guys know how invoices are going to go down. Are they going to be like, what do you want your invoice to include? How much detail? How much backup documentation? That's an important thing for both primes and subs. Make it clear in your contracts what's expected of through the invoicing process, whether you're the one getting the invoice and you're going to pay it, or whether you're the one submitting the invoice. You want to know what your prime wants from you. Okay, go on. Okay, communicating saves relationships. Even if things are going bad in your contract, even if you think the other side is breaching the contract and doing wrong, go ahead and communicate about it and talk about it and try to resolve it without suing each other or without saying you're going to breach or without stopping performance. And it could help when you think of your contracts. Make sure that, you know, it's clear how deliverables are accepted. Make sure it's clear what you do if you want to change the scope of work. Make sure it's clear what you do if your invoices are not what is expected by the other parties. Make sure it's clear about when you will get paid and what payment on time means. What if performance is not up to snuff? What are each of you going to do about it? All of those things, the more clear you can be in your subcontract and the more clear you have that understanding of each other, the better off you're going to be. We can jump to the next slide. Because breaking up is hard to do. Having a fight over a contract, whether with the government or whether with a prime or a sub, it's hard to do. It's costly. So make sure that you try to talk with each other before you do that. And sometimes a contract breach or a breakup, depending on how bad it is or what happens, may result in you suffering a lot of legal fees, may result in damage to your reputation. Depending on what happened, it may result in the other party going and raising a complaint with the government, reporting you to the government about doing something wrong. So you want to make sure that you're talking with each other and you have clear contracts. We can go to the next slide.
That was the last slide.
Oh, okay. Well, we have about 3 minutes to answer some other questions, if there are any out there.
Yes. So a few questions that were earlier. I am a service-disabled veteran-owned small business that wants to sell our software to the VA. And I think this may be a question for you, Anna. We have been told the VA prefers to buy software through existing contracts, similar to the joint venture. Would it be best for me to create a software reseller agreement with an existing VA contractor or subcontractor so they can offer the software to the customer as an ODC through their existing contract?
So be careful about it being an ODC. ODC is other direct cost. It may be easier for you to form a teaming relationship where the company that has the reseller agreement already or is the prime could sell your services as part of their offering, if those terms are advantageous to you. An ODC is something different. So for example, if somebody were to I don't know, let's say do event planning and your software was the registration software. ODC means that they would be providing it and charging the government what they're paying for themselves. That is more like a pass-through cost. Travel is often ODC. You don't necessarily want to do that where it's a professional service. So bottom line is, if it makes sense for a business to find those primes that could include your software on their contracts, that's a faster way in. You could, in parallel, long-term plan, develop relationships and sell to the VA and establish your own contracts and reseller agreements down the line as well. Long way to answer a short question.
Thank you, Anna. The other question is, I'm a woman-owned small business / HubZone marketing agency and want to pursue marketing contracts with the VA. I partnered with a service-disabled veteran-owned business as the sub, but was told that wasn't good enough because they need to do 50% of the work. Is there a way for a woman-owned small business / HubZone to work with the VA when they're the primary skill set?
Yes, there is. VA, however, has a Vets First program, Veterans First Preference. So we do the market research, and if possible, we set aside work in the following order. First, to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, then to veteran-owned small businesses, then to HubZone and 8A, then women-owned, then any other small business. So in a competitive area like marketing, for example, where there are veteran-owned small businesses that could do the work, it will be difficult to differentiate yourself in a way that can fill that need. So perhaps if the partnership with that veteran-owned company didn't work out, you may find another partner that could do 51% of the work and you could do 49, where they would still be able to legitimately and legally carry that set aside contract. Your other path, frankly, may be to work with other agencies that don't have such a strong mission-focused preference on the service disabled veteran-owned status, where they would be likely to set it aside for women-owned just as much as for vets. Thanks.
Thank you. And this will be our last question, everyone, because we're at 3:01. Not reading that part. Does the government measure the percentage of all small business awards that are delivered by a joint venture. This is important to understand the competitive landscape for emerging businesses.
I'll take that one too.
Yes,
The
yes,
government,
please.
when we do the math, we don't care if it's a joint venture or not. We look at the individual entities. So if we award to company ABC, ABCD, ABCQ joint venture, as long as those companies are legitimate and they have their certifications, we count the awards per socioeconomic category. Joint ventures by themselves are not a goal. They are not counted as separate. So it's a way of getting business. It's not necessarily a special goal of the government.
Thank you, Anna and Margaret. Thank you, everyone that have attended and who's still on the call today. Again, you will receive a copy of a link to the presentation and to the recording by tomorrow morning. You will receive responses to your questions by next week. Thank you, everyone. I am giving you your day back, and please enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Margaret. Bye, folks.
Thank you, Margaret.
Bye, Wendy. Bye, Anna. Thanks.